Welcome to this lecture on romantic essays. Now, before I begin the romantic essays, uh, I would like to talk a little bit about the premise on which the romantic essays it is, as we find it, was built. Now, the thing is that the essay as a genre evolved from the explorations into diverse subjects, which were made by Sir Francis Bacon, which were made by people like Montaigne. Now, their explorations were more, what should I call it, objective. Their explorations were more to the point, were more pedantic, were more didactic, whereas the romantic essay is very different from that. The romantic essay is very, very personal. That is to say, the romantic essay deals with the personal impression of the author on the diverse subject matters that are there in question. All right. Now, uh, now, before I begin once again, yes, before I begin with the romantic essays, let me quickly uh, deal with the era itself. Now, you see, the Romantic period, which was spanning from the late 18th century to the early 19th century, it was a time of great creativity in several fields, the prose being one of them, and it saw the emergence of several essayists who combined their personal reflections with critical analysis, contributing to the profundity of literary thought of that period. Now, this era is very significant in the prose works as well. That is what I wish to talk about. Now, let us talk about first William Hazlitt. Now, Hazlitt, his dates are 1778 to 1830. He was a prominent critic and essayist and a social commentator. He was born in Maidstone, England, and he initially pursued painting before dedicating himself to writing. And he is best known for his insightful and often provocative essays on art, literature, and society. Now, what are his major works? The first major work of William Hazlitt is Table Talk, a collection of essays which were very controversial for their time being. They were published from 1821 to 22, and there are several. Uh, the diversity of the essay is huge because it deals from politics to art to literature of the times, and this becomes a very interesting social commentary. Number two is The Spirit of the Age, which was finally published in 1825. This is a series of profiling of the contemporary thinkers and writers, and Hazlitt is identifying who is important, who is not, who's who of the era. The third important text is The Characters of Shakespeare's Plays, which was published in 1817. And this is a very interesting and a very influential literary criticism of Shakespeare's characters. And this provides a very insightful probing into Shakespeare's mindset from the romantic perspective. Now, what are the major themes that are used by Hazlitt? Now, Hazlitt often explores the nature of genius, the role of art in society, and the interplay between politics and culture. Why is this very significant? Because you see, as late as the Victorian era, so almost 50 years later, Walter Pater and the others, they are talking about the different issues of art. That is, they are talking about art for art's sake, art for society's sake, and all. And Hazlitt and the others, they are thinking of art and society as uh, two aspects of the same coin. They are looking at a very organic relationship or interrelationship between art and society. The second thing is, uh, one second. The second aspect is that he was deeply concerned with the individual experience. That is, for the first time, the romantic essay, was concerned with the individual, the subjective nature of perception. This becomes very, very important because you see, until now, there was observation which was objective, which was really not that much talking about the individual, which was not really talking about how I think, how I feel, and so on and so forth. And for the first time, Hazlitt introduced the subjective nature of perception, the perspective of the individual in play, and he kept on frequently reflecting on the nature of passion, the role of passion and emotion in human life. Up till that point of time, my dear friends, literature, especially the essay, focused on the dispassionate disposition of the human animal. That is, if you read Bacon's essays, you will see that Bacon is simply talking about how to be very objective in a very difficult situation. So, those are like those life skills that we have to learn over time. But what happens is that uh, Lamb, Hazlitt, and the others, they were talking about something which is very, very palpable, something which is very, very important and interesting. That is how passion and emotion, they talk about, they influence the subjective human life. The I was first for the first time coming into focus in the essays. Now, what are the special features and contributions of Hazlitt? That is, Hazlitt has a very clear, sharp, and precise prose. He used that clear and sharp prose to explore complex ideas in a way that is accessible to all and sundry. Second is, his essays had a significant influence on later critics and writers, particularly in his exploration of the self, the individual, and Hazlitt introduced a sort of, what should I call it, an organic form of literary criticism where the subjective influence of the subjective reading of a text becomes very, very important in the analysis of a text. Okay. Now we come to the second author of the day, who is Charles Lamb. Now, Charles Lamb was born in London in 1775. He is very much celebrated for his essays that blend humor and pathos. And he worked for the East India Company as a clerk, but his true passion was writing. Lamb's works include the Essays of Elia, the Last Essays of Elia, and so on and so forth. And these are cherished for their warmth, their wit, and their keen observations of everyday life. Lamb takes up a very simple patch of life and blends it with fact and fiction, with memory and contemporaneity, to give birth to something which is incredibly enjoyable for every single reader. And he truly made the essay very, very personal because he started addressing the reader directly. So if you read an essay like The Superannuated Man, there you will see that Charles Lamb is directly addressing the audience by saying, if perchance, dear reader. So you see, this is a very conversational tone which was introduced in the essay by Lamb. He passed away in 1834. Now, what are his major works? The first is Essays of Elia, which came out in 1823, which is a collection of personal essays where Lamb reflects on diverse aspects of his own life, the people that he knew, and the experiences that have shaped him. The second book, which is very important, is The Last Essays of Elia, which was published in 1833. It is a continuation of the previous work, but here the essays are more melancholic, dealing with themes of loss and memory. The third book that is very important is Tales from Shakespeare, which was published in 1807. It was co authored with his sister, Mary Lamb, where Lamb retold the Shakespearean plays for children, and it is still one of the very favorite books of children. I still remember when I was a child, I was first introduced to Shakespeare by this one work. So, what are the themes of Lamb? Now, Lamb's works are steeped in memory, nostalgia, and the passage of time. His essays often reflect on the contrast between the idealized past and the realities of the present. And the focus is on the idiosyncrasies, the peculiarities of the human nature, and there is a warmth of interpersonal relationship between the characters of Lamb's essays and the readers themselves. But what are the special features and contributions of Charles Lamb's essays? Lamb's essays are celebrated for their blend of humor and sentiment. They often offer a very deeply personal view of life, and this always resonated with the readers. For example, if you read The Superannuated Man, if you read Dream Children a Reverie, if you read On Old China, if you read South Sea House, you will see that Lamb is reflecting on all sorts of issues which you and I have faced. For example, those of us who are working in different colleges, those of us who are working in different offices, if you are a working individual, if your parents are working individuals, and you talk to them, they will often say that they are tired of all that work. And you will see that on the day that they get their leave, that is, if it is a Sunday or some other day, you will see how desperately we try to enjoy that day to the fullest. So much so that there is as if a detrimental desire in all of us to explore the day and exhaust ourselves in the process. Just like in India, in West Bengal at least, when we have the Durga Puja vacations, you will see that all of us are rushing to go sightseeing, and all of us are trying to make the most of that small passage of time to visit a new place, to do a lot of pandal hopping, to catch up with the old faces of our lives, and etc., etc., etc. So much so that in that uh, busy schedule for enjoyment, we kind of exhaust ourselves. I still remember that earlier, by the Navami, I used to be absolutely exhausted because I did so much of catching up. I did so much of pandal hopping. Now I no longer do that much. But earlier I used to do that. Now I just open the TV, I just turn on the TV, and I just watch all those panels where there is a lot of rush, etc. Because I know that if I go there, I will not be really able to relish that artwork in that way, uh, because they won't. I'll have to wait for 2 3 hours. Then they won't let me stay there for even 20 seconds, and it causes a lot of disappointment. So now I do that, but earlier I used to go out there, enjoy with my friends or my family, and so on and so forth, especially with my father. So you see, what happens is that Charleston talks about these issues. Like sometimes we even feel that we are so much bogged down by work that we even feel that we are glued to the uh, desk, we are crucified to the desk as if. And Lamb talks about these issues, and he says that if I had a son, I would christen him Mister Nothing to Do. So that is all of our desire. That oh, if I find one day when I have nothing to do, I will be the happiest. So that's he talks about the deep-seated human desires and his ability to capture the nuances of the everyday experiences. His use of the familiar essay form. So that becomes very, very interesting. And Lamb is one of the most beloved essayists of all time because of this one issue. Okay, now the next author is Lee Hunt. Lee Hunt is a very interesting author. Uh, he was born in 1784 in Southgate, London. He was a poet, critic, and essayist. And above all, he was a very influential figure in the Romantic movement because he was an advocate for the literary freedom, and his friendships with prominent poets of the time, especially the second generation of the poets like Shelley, Keats, and others, made him very important. And Hunt's essays became very, very vital because of their blend of literary criticism and personal reflection. Now, what are his major works? The first major work is The Indicator, which was published between 1819 to 1821, which is a series published in Hunt's journal, and it combines the literary criticism with personal musings. The second is The Companion, 1828, it was published. The essays covered a broad spectrum of topics, from poetry to social issues, and this shows Hunt's versatility as a writer. The third is Imagination and Fancy, which was published in 1844, and this is a critical essay in which Hunt explores the poetic imagination, offering insights into the creative process. What are Hunt's themes? The first theme is that he explores natural beauty with nature of beauty and the role of imagination in everyday life. Number two is that he was talking about the issues of social justice. He was advocating for the reforms of society, and he was the first person to talk about the uh, plight of the underprivileged of the society, how they could be uh, helped in their struggles of every day. The third issue is he often blends his literary criticism with personal narrative, and this becomes a very interesting and unique perspective on the interplay of life and literature. Now, what are his special features? His special features and contributions are that his essays are characterized by their conversational tone and the blend of literary criticism and personal reflection. Number two is that he was a very key figure in the Romantic movement. His journals helped in the publication of different writers. He helped to shape the public taste of the time, and he influenced the direction in which the literature of the time was flowing. Now, Hunt's advocacy for the literary freedom and his role in promoting the works of the other romantic poets, such as Shelley and Keats, it marked his lasting contribution on the literary world. He was much like what Ezra Pound did for the modernist period. So, Hunt was very influential in that sense of the term. Now, next author is Thomas De Quincey. I have found out many, many authors, as many as I could find out, so that I could help all of you. Okay. Thomas De Quincey's biographical details are that he was born in 1785, he passed away in 1859. He was born in Manchester, and he was one of the greatest confessional writers of his time, and he developed a different writing style, which was a very introspective style, through which he Kaku এটা একটু মাকে দিয়ে দাও। through which he explored the human complexity in his essays, and he talked about the deep-seated feelings of the human beings. And there is consequently a great psychological depth and a vivid narrative style in Thomas De Quincey's works. Let's look at his major works. The most important work of Thomas De Quincey is Confessions of an English Opium Eater, which was published in 1821. It is De Quincey's most famous work, and this autobiographical essay delves into his addiction to opium and his effects on his life and mind. The second book is a sequel to the Confessions called Suspiria de Profundis. It was published in 1845, and this is a more introspective, exploring the theme, more introspective work exploring the themes of loss, memory, and the unconscious mind. The third work was a must, which we had to read as students when we were doing our graduation, when we had Macbeth in our syllabus. On the Knocking at the Gate in Macbeth, it was published in 1823. This is a very famous critical essay where, in Act 2, Scene 3 of William Shakespeare's Macbeth, the murder of Duncan has taken place already, and Macbeth and Lady Macbeth have already spoken. They want to hide the daggers with which they had murdered Duncan, and they are trying to wipe off the trails of their misdeed. And during this time, there is a knocking at the gate. Macduff and the others have come to awaken Duncan for the next morning when he is about to depart. And during this time, the porter at the castle of Inverness, Macbeth's castle, is waking up. He is drunk, and he is responding to the cold atmosphere and the knocking outside, and he thinks that Inverness is ironically hell itself, and he is the devil porter. And at each knocking, he is talking about a topical allusion, that is what was happening during the time. And this is a very beautiful scene and a very beautiful essay. Very, very beautiful essay. And this scene and this essay, both of them take such liberty of human expression that without reading them, it is very, without actually studying them, not just reading them, without studying them, you really cannot appreciate the depth and the uh, impact of the essay or the scene itself. Now, this is a very specific moment in Shakespeare's play, and it illustrates De Quincey's unique blend of psychological analysis and literary criticism. Now, what are the themes of Thomas De Quincey? Among the themes, the first is his writings delve into the complexities of the human mind, and he explores themes of addiction, consciousness, and the nature of dreams. Number two is that he was particularly interested in the seedier aspects of human experience, and he uses his own life experience as the lens through which he examines the broader philosophical questions. Now, what are his special contributions and features? Number one is that there is a psychological depth. There is the exploration of the unconscious mind, which prefigured later developments in psychoanalysis. And his confessional style and his focus on the darker, seedier aspects of the human experience had a significant influence on later writers, particularly in the development of the Gothic and the psychological novel that came very, very soon. Now, next one is Samuel Taylor Coleridge, one of my favorite poets. Coleridge was born in 1772 in Ottery St. Mary, and he passed away in 1834. Uh, he was primarily known as a poet, and but he was a very profound essayist as well. Uh, Coleridge almost founded the Romantic cult with William Wordsworth via his masterpiece, one of his masterpieces, which was the lyrical ballads in poetry and Biographia Literaria, which is a deeply philosophical exploration into the nuances and the nooks and crevices of Romanticism. Biographia Literaria was published in 1817. It is a combination of autobiography and literary criticism. As you know, biographia means biography, literaria means literary. So it is a literary biography in a sense, and it offers insights into Coleridge's philosophy of literature, his views on imagination, his views on nature, his views on the contemporary writing, and so on and so forth. So it is a wide array of personal influences or impressions. Number two is The Friend, a collection of essays on politics, religion, and literature, which was published during 1809 and 1810. And third is Lectures on Shakespeare and Milton, which came out in 1811 and 1812. It was a series of lectures that demonstrate Coleridge's deep engagement with the works of Shakespeare and Milton, blending criticism with philosophical reflection. Coincidentally, the Porter's scene which Thomas de Quincey was talking about, Coleridge was also talking about, and it was Coleridge who first thought that, who first had some very interesting ideas about Macbeth, and he first explored Macbeth from a very different light, apart from De Quincey. Now, what are his themes? His essays are often very explorative of imagination, the nature of creativity, and the relationship between the individual and the divine. Number two is that he was also very deeply concerned with the role of the poet in the society, as well as the moral and philosophical implications of literature itself. Now, what are his features and contributions? Number one is the philosophical depth from which Coleridge explores literature and the relationship between literature and life. Number two is that he gave us a very deep seated idea about the role of fancy and imagination, and fancy and imagination kind of impregnate all his theories on the role of the poet, and how the poet can actually profoundly impact the development of literary criticism. Coleridge says that there are three things. Sorry, there are two issues, two human faculties. The first is fancy, the second is imagination. Fancy is when I'm isolating a memory from a space and time. Imagine 3 months ago I have gone to a trip, and right now while I am watching this video I am thinking about the trip. If that is what is happening, then that is fancy, because the trip was not at my home, so it was at some place other than my home. So spatial shift is there, and since it happened 3 months earlier, so there is a temporal shift as well. So this space time shift, this spatio-temporal shift, is what creates fancy. Now every human being is endowed with the faculty of fancy. Whereas imagination is something different. What is imagination? Imagination is something which is very interesting. That is, imagination is a process through which we can recreate the universe in itself. Imagine the route from my home to my college, that is very much known to me. If, for example, anybody asks me that, sir, how do you go to college? I can close my eyes and I can tell him that I take a bus from here, I take a metro from there, and I reach my college, blah, 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 blah. That is the story. How do I do it? Because I have a miniature map in my head. I can recreate that route in my head, right? This power of recreation is something which Coleridge calls primary imagination. All human beings have it. What is secondary imagination? For example, if it so happens that tomorrow suddenly the metro station comes closer to my house, and from the metro station I have to take a bus to reach my college, then this shift of that same route into different component parts, into divergent component parts that are not normal, that are not everyday, if that happens, that is, there is a sort of defamiliarization of that same common route. If my same familiar route becomes defamiliarized, then that becomes, and it still works as a unified whole. Okay, it still works as an organic unified whole. Then that becomes secondary imagination. That is the power to recreate the universe by almost creating a different sort of jigsaw puzzle. Okay, that is just like in a game of cards, we shuffle the cards. No matter how you shuffle the cards, the card game still works. That is the thing. The card game still works. That's the beauty of imagination, of secondary imagination. Now, not all people have it, only the poets have it. Okay. As Jibanananda says, সকলেই কবি নয়, কেউ কেউ কবি. Not everybody is a poet, but some are. Now, therefore, Coleridge's works help to define the Romantic movement, and his influence can be seen in the works of the later poets and critics as well. Finally, let us conclude that the essayists of the Romantic period have been instrumental in shaping the literary landscape of their time, and through their exploration of the individual experience, their creativity, and the complexity of the human nature, they left a lasting legacy that continued to influence writers and thinkers today. So, thank you for your attention. Thank you for paying heed to my boring lecture, and I hope to see you in the next one. So thank you so much. If you have any questions, please put them in the comment section. I'll be very happy to answer.